A scream pierces the fog at Candlewick Stables, where shadows hide deadly secrets. In 1932 Sussex, Governess Eleanor Vance lies dead, a dagger in her heart. Who wielded it? Was it greed, jealousy, or a buried past? Hercule Poirot arrives to unravel a web of lies. Suspects with motives, clues that deceive, and a truth that threatens an empire. From a hidden will to a staged gunshot, each step draws him closer to a killer. Will justice prevail, or will the fog conceal the guilty forever? Chapter 1. The Shadow in the Mist. The autumn of 1932 draped Sussex in a mantle of mist, its tendrils curling around the ancient oaks that guarded Candlewick Stables like silent sentinels. The estate, nestled in a secluded valley, was a monument to equine prestige, its sprawling manor house of weathered grey stone exuding both grandeur and secrets. The stables themselves, famed for breeding champion racehorses, stood as the heart of the Harrington legacy, their timbered roofs glistening with dew under the fading twilight. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and hay, a quiet symphony broken only by the occasional whinny of a restless stallion. Miss Eleanor Vance, the young governess tasked with educating the Harrington children, was known for her solitary evening strolls. At 28, she possessed a quiet grace, her auburn hair pinned neatly beneath a modest hat, her green eyes sharp with intellect. Employed 6 months prior, she had become a fixture at Candlewick, her presence as unassuming as the fog that now enveloped her path. On this particular evening, as the stable clock prepared to chime 7, she wandered toward the paddock, her cloak trailing lightly over the grass, her footsteps softened by the moist ground. The tranquility shattered with a scream, a raw, piercing cry that tore through the mist like a blade. Reginald Thorne, the stable hand, a wiry man with weathered hands and a perpetual scowl, burst from the hayloft, his boots thudding against the wooden ladder. His lantern swung wildly, casting erratic shadows as he stumbled into the paddock. There, beneath the gnarled branch of shock and fear, Lord Archibald Harrington, master of Candlewick, emerged from the manor, his imposing frame clad in a tweed jacket, his face a mask of controlled dismay. At 52, he carried the weight of his lineage with a stern jaw and piercing blue eyes, though tonight they flickered with something akin to dread. "What in blazes has happened here?" he demanded, striding to the body. He knelt briefly, his fingers brushing the dagger's handle before recoiling. "This is murder, most foul," he declared, his voice low, resonant with authority. "No one touches anything until the police arrive." The crowd parted as Lady Constance Harrington approached, her silk gown whispering against the grass. Her delicate features, framed by raven curls, were taut with strain, her hands twisting a lace handkerchief. "Eleanor," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Who could do such a thing?" Her eyes darted to her husband, a fleeting glance that carried a weight of unspoken questions. Was it grief? Or something else? Guilt, perhaps? Or fear? Word spread swiftly to the village, and by nightfall, the local constable had cordoned off the paddock, his lantern casting a feeble glow against the encroaching darkness. The dagger, identified as part of the manor's antique collection, was accessible to anyone in the household, a fact that deepened the mystery. Muddy footprints trailed from the body toward the woods, but the fog had smeared them into ambiguity, offering no clear suspect. Whispers among the servants hinted at tensions. Miss Vance had been asking questions, poking into matters of the estate. Her curiosity, perhaps unwelcome. The stable clock tolled mournfully, its echo mingling with the rustle of leaves. The household retreated, leaving the governess's body under a tarpaulin, a grim sentinel awaiting the dawn. Yet the question lingered, heavy as the mist. Who among the residents of Candlewick Stables harbored a motive dark enough to drown? And not a soul saw a thing, or so they claim. He gestured toward the paddock, where constables milled about, their boots sinking into the sodden earth. Poirot's gaze swept the landscape, noting the stable's sturdy beams, the paddock's low fence, and the woods beyond, where the footprints vanished. "Mon ami," he said, his voice precise. "The fog, it conceals, but it also reveals. We shall find the truth, hidden though it be." He approached the crime scene, his patent leather shoes incongruous against the mud. The body had been removed, but chalk marked where Miss Vance had fallen, the dagger now in police custody. Poirot crouched, examining the ground. "The footprints, they are indistinct, but they lead somewhere, n'est-ce pas?" Japp recounted the facts. Eleanor Vance, employed to tutor the Harringtons' 2 children, aged 10 and 12, had been well liked but reserved. No known enemies, yet her wrists bore bruises, her sleeve torn, suggesting a struggle. The dagger, a family heirloom, was kept in a display case in the manor's hall, unlocked and accessible. "Anyone could have taken it," Japp noted. "But why her? And why now?" Inside the manor, Poirot met Lady Constance in the drawing-room, its walls adorned with portraits of stern-faced ancestors. She sat rigidly, her elegance marred by dark circles under her eyes. "Miss Vance was like family," she said, her voice soft but strained. "She was kind to the children, diligent. I cannot fathom this tragedy." Yet Poirot noted her fidgeting fingers, the slight tremor in her tone. Was it grief or the weight of a secret? Lord Harrington joined them, his presence commanding. "She was a fine governess," he said gruffly, "but perhaps too curious about matters beyond her station." His words hung heavy, a hint of warning. Poirot's mustache twitched. "Curiosity, monsieur, is often the spark of truth, or the kindling of danger." As the interview concluded, a distant neigh echoed from the stables, sharp against the morning's quiet. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The stables, the heart of the estate's wealth, held more than horses, he suspected. He revealing neat handwriting. "The shadows here are not mere fog. They watch me. A.H. knows my secret." A.H. Archibald Harrington? A chill ran through Poirot. The governess had uncovered something, perhaps tied to the estate's fortune or its master's past. As evening fell, the fog thickened once more, cloaking Candlewick in mystery. Poirot stood at the manor's threshold, gazing at the stable's silhouette. The scream, the dagger, the footprints, all pieces of a puzzle, but incomplete. Somewhere in this household, among the lords and ladies, servants and physicians, lurked a killer. And Poirot, with his unerring logic, vowed to bring them to light. Chapter 2. The Arrival of the Little Belgian. The morning sun of October 1932 pierced the Sussex fog with feeble determination, casting a pallid glow over Candlewick Stables. The estate, nestled in its verdant valley, seemed to hold its breath, the weight of the previous night's tragedy pressing upon every stone and blade of grass. The manor house, with its ivy-clad walls and tall chimneys, stood as a silent witness to the murder of Miss Eleanor Vance. the governess whose lifeless form had been found in the paddock, a Harrington dagger buried in her heart. The air carried a chill, not just from the autumn breeze but from the unspoken fears that now haunted the household. Hercule Poirot, the diminutive Belgian detective renowned for his meticulous methods and waxed mustache, arrived at Candlewick in a chauffeured Rolls-Royce, its tires crunching the gravel drive. His Homburg hat tilted at a precise angle. His green eyes gleamed with intellectual anticipation as he stepped onto the estate, his patent leather shoes gleaming despite the mud. Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard, his old friend and occasional skeptic, awaited him near the manor's entrance, puffing on a briar pipe that sent curls of smoke into the misty air. Japp's face, weathered by years of chasing criminals, bore the strain of a case already proving elusive. "Poirot, old chap," Japp greeted. Thinning still clung to the ground, obscuring details and lending an eerie quiet to the estate. Japp recounted the facts as they walked, his pipe gesturing for emphasis. "Miss Eleanor Vance, 28, governess to the Harrington children, 2 young ones, 10 and 12. Been here 6 months, well liked, or so they say. No known enemies, but her body tells a different story. Bruises on her wrists, a torn sleeve, signs of a struggle. The dagger, part of the manor's antique collection, kept in an unlocked case in the hall, was driven clean through her chest. Anyone in the household could have taken it, Poirot. And those footprints leading to the woods, smudged to oblivion by the fog and mud, no tracing them." Poirot crouched beside the chalk outline, his gloved hands hovering over the ground. The earth was churned, as if a scuffle had occurred, yet the footprints were indeed indistinct, their edges blurred by the damp. "The ground, it speaks, mon ami," he murmured, "but its voice is muffled. These prints, they lead somewhere, yet they conceal their master. A clever ruse, perhaps, to mislead us." He rose, brushing his gloves, and turned his attention to the stables, their open doors revealing the restless movements of horses within. "The stables, they are the heart of this estate, n'est-ce pas? Wealth, pride, secrets, they all reside here." Inside the manor, Poirot was ushered into the drawing-room, its walls adorned with portraits of stern-faced Harrington ancestors and fox-hunting scenes, the air heavy with the scent of polished oak and beeswax. Lady Constance Harrington awaited, seated on a velvet chaise, her raven curls framed by a high lace collar, her silk gown whispering elegance. Yet her pale face and the faint tremor in her hands betrayed her composure. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice soft but strained, "this tragedy has shaken us all. Eleanor was like family, devoted to our children. I cannot fathom who would do such a thing." Her eyes, however, darted to the side, avoiding his piercing gaze, and Poirot noted the slight clench of her jaw, a sign of grief or lineage. His blue eyes sharp beneath a furrowed brow. His tweed jacket, though impeccably tailored, seemed to hang heavily on him today. "Monsieur Poirot," he said gruffly, "I trust you'll get to the bottom of this. Eleanor was a fine governess, but she overstepped her bounds, poking into our financial affairs. Still, murder. It's unthinkable." His words carried a warning, and Poirot wondered, was it indignation or a desire to steer the investigation? "Lord Harrington," Poirot said, his voice smooth, "a woman does not die for asking questions, unless those questions threaten someone. What did she discover, I wonder?" Harrington's jaw tightened, but he offered no reply, only a curt nod before turning to pour a brandy from a crystal decanter. Poirot requested to see the dagger's display case, located in the manor's grand hall. The case, oak with glass panels, held an array of antique weapons, swords, pistols and daggers, all part of the Harrington collection. The empty slot where the murder weapon had rested was glaringly obvious, its velvet lining pristine. "Unlocked, you say?" Poirot asked Japp, who nodded. "Anyone with access to this hall, family, servants, guests, could have taken it. A democratic weapon, n'est-ce pas?" Next, Poirot interviewed Reginald Thorne, the stable hand who had discovered the body. They met in the stables, where the air was thick with the musk of horses and leather, the stalls filled with restless animals. Reginald, wiry and weathered, shifted uneasily, his calloused hands fidgeting with a pitchfork. "I was in the hayloft, tending to some gear, when I heard the scream," he said, his voice low. "Ran down and found her. Miss Vance, dead, with that dagger in her. I didn't touch nothing, I swear." His eyes darted to the loft, and Poirot noted the tremor in his hands. "You argued with her, did you not?" Poirot pressed. "She accused you of mistreating the horses, oui?" Reginald flushed. "She was always poking about the stables, saying I was too rough with the beasts. We had words that afternoon, but I didn't kill her." His defensiveness was palpable, and Poirot filed it away, a threat plants and the hum of a glass-paned roof. His spectacles glinted as he spoke, his voice calm but measured. "Eleanor confided in me," he said. "She was anxious, said she'd received threats, unsigned notes left in her room. I prescribed sedatives for her nerves." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Threats, monsieur? And you did not report this?" Beaumont adjusted his glasses, his composure slipping. "She asked me not to, said it was a private matter, a lover's confidence, or a cover for his own involvement." As the interviews concluded, Poirot returned to the drawing-room, where Lady Constance offered more tea. As she poured, a crumpled note slipped from her pocket, falling to the rug. Poirot retrieved it swiftly, his eyes scanning the scrawled words. "Leave Candlewick, or suffer the consequences." Unsigned, it was a chilling echo of Beaumont's claim. "Madame," Poirot said, holding it up, "this is yours, oui?" Her face paled, and she stammered. I found it in the hall. I meant to show it to the police." Her lie was thin, and Poirot's mustache twitched again. The day waned, the fog thickening once more, cloaking the estate in a shroud of mystery. Poirot stood at the manor's threshold, gazing at the stable's silhouette, their lanterns casting feeble glows. The scream, the dagger, the note. All pieces of a puzzle, but the picture remained incomplete. The household, from lord to servant, harboured secrets, and Poirot knew the truth lay in their contradictions. As a distant neigh echoed from the stables, he murmured, "The horses, they know more than they tell, and so perhaps do the people." Chapter 3. Suspects in the Drawing Room. The late morning sun of October 1932 filtered through the heavy damask curtains of Candlewick Stables' drawing room, casting a golden glow over the polished mahogany and ancestral portraits that adorned the walls. The air was thick with the scent of beeswax and old leather, mingling with an undercurrent of tension that seemed to pulse restless, each betraying a flicker of unease under Poirot's piercing gaze. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice precise, accented with a cadence that demanded attention. "A crime has been committed, a life extinguished in the heart of this estate. Mademoiselle Vance. She was not merely a governess, no. She was a woman with connections, with secrets, and, perhaps, with enemies. Each of you, I observe, has a thread that ties you to her fate. Let us unravel these threads one by one and see where they lead." His mustache twitched, a subtle sign of the little grey cells at work. as he turned to the first suspect. Lord Archibald Harrington sat in a high-backed chair, his robust frame filling the space with an air of authority. At 52, his weathered face, framed by greying temples, spoke of a life spent commanding both men and horses. His blue eyes, usually steely, flickered with unease as he met Poirot's gaze. "Monsieur Harrington," Poirot said, pacing slowly, "you have said Mademoiselle Vance was too curious about the estate's accounts. What did she discover that troubled you so?" Harrington's jaw tightened, his fingers drumming on the armrest. "She was a governess, not an accountant," he said gruffly. "She'd been poking into ledgers, asking about the stable's finances. Questions no employee ought to ask. I told her to stick to teaching my children." He paused, his voice lowering. "The stables are my legacy, monsieur. They've bred champions for generations. Any suggestion of mismanagement could ruin us." His words carried weight, hinting at a motive. If Vance had uncovered financial irregularities, her silence might have been worth killing for. Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing. "And these irregularities, monsieur, did they exist?" Harrington's face reddened, but he held his tongue, offering only a curt shake of his head. Poirot filed the reaction away, a knot in the thread of suspicion. Next, he turned to Lady Constance Harrington, seated on the velvet chaise, her raven curls moment that crystallized this unease. Lady Constance hesitated, her fingers tightening on the handkerchief. She once suggested she had a claim to this estate," she said, her voice faltering. "It was absurd, of course, but bold." Poirot's mustache twitched again. A claim to the estate, a motive for murder perhaps, to silence an interloper. Reginald Thorne, the stable-hand who had discovered the body, stood near the fireplace, his wiry frame tense, his calloused hands clasped tightly. His weathered face, lined from years under the sun, was etched with unease, his eyes darting to the door as if longing to escape. "Monsieur Thorne," Poirot said, stepping closer. "You were in the hayloft when the scream pierced the night. You argued with Mademoiselle Vance that afternoon, oui? Over the treatment of the horses?" Reginald nodded, his throat bobbing. "She was always at the stables, checking on the beasts, saying I was too rough. We had words, but I'd never harm her. I found her dead, monsieur, and it shook me to my core." His voice cracked, but his eyes held a flicker of defiance, and Poirot wondered if fear or guilt drove his agitation. "You were alone in the loft?" Poirot asked. "No one to confirm your whereabouts?" Reginald's silence was answer enough, his hands trembling slightly. Eliza Thorne, Reginald's wife and the manor's housemaid, stood protectively near her husband, her blonde hair pinned tightly, her apron crisp despite the morning's chaos. Her eyes, red-rimmed from tears or sleeplessness, glared at Poirot with a mix of defiance and fear. "Madame Thorne," Poirot said, his tone gentle but probing, "you clean the manor, including Mademoiselle Vance's room. You alibi your husband, yet your own movements are vague. Where were you when the scream was heard?" Eliza's lips tightened. "I was in the east wing, polishing silver. I heard the scream, ran to the paddock with the others. Reggie didn't do it. He's a good man, monsieur." Her defense was fierce, but her eyes darted to Reginald, and Poirot sensed a crack in her certainty, threatening her to leave. "I thought it a prank, perhaps from a servant. She was fragile lately." His words were smooth, but Poirot caught the hesitation. A physician so close to the family, privy to their secrets, had Vance's confidences made him a threat or a target? Rumours among the servants hinted at Beaumont's fondness for the governess, a spurned affection that could turn deadly. Poirot paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, his mind weaving the threads together. "Each of you," he said, his voice rising, "has a connection to the victim, a reason to wish her gone. Lord Harrington, your fortune. Lady Constance, your pride. Monsieur Thorne, your reputation. Madame Thorne, your loyalty. Dr. Beaumont, your heart. But which of you held the dagger?" The room fell silent, the clocks ticking, deafening in the stillness. As the group prepared to disperse, Lady Constance rose, her handkerchief slipping to the floor. Poirot retrieved it, noticing a crumpled note tucked within. He unfolded it discreetly. "Leave or suffer." The same words as before, but this one bore a faint smudge of ink, as if written in haste. "Madame," he said, holding it up, "this is yours." Her face drained of colour, her stammered explanation unconvincing. I found it in the hall," she said. "I meant to show it to Inspector Japp." Poirot pocketed the note, his eyes never leaving hers. The interviews concluded, but the air remained charged, the suspects' glances darting like moths in a storm. Poirot stepped to the window, gazing at the stables, their silhouette stark against the fog. A distant thud echoed from the direction of the stables, sharp and unnatural, like a door slamming in the wind, or something more sinister. "Mon ami," Poirot said to Japp, "the puzzle grows. We must visit the stables again. Something there calls to us." As the household dispersed, their footsteps echoing on the parquet floor, Poirot's mind churned. The note, the arguments, the threats, all pointed to a web of deception, but the killer's hand remained hidden. The thud from the stables lingered in his thoughts, a new clue or a distraction. The little grey cells, this veiled landscape, his green eyes sharp beneath his Homburg hat, his little grey cells humming as he sought to unravel the threads of deception woven into the household. Poirot's investigation had already stirred the waters of Candlewick, and now, as the clock struck 2, he turned his attention to the past of the victim herself. Miss Vance's quarters, a modest room on the manor's second floor overlooking the stables, offered the first avenue of inquiry. Inspector Japp accompanied him, his pipe tucked away, his expression one of grudging respect for Poirot's methods. "You're chasing ghosts now, Poirot," Japp said, his boots echoing on the polished oak stairs. "The girl's dead. Surely the answers are with the living." "No, mon ami," Poirot replied, his voice precise. "The past, it speaks as loudly as the present. Mademoiselle Vance, she was more than a governess, I think. Her secrets, they are the key." The room was small but tidy, its single window framing the stable's silhouette. A narrow bed, a writing desk, and a bookshelf lined with volumes on equestrian history and literature hinted at a woman of intellect and curiosity. A faint scent of lavender lingered, a ghostly trace of the occupant now gone. On the desk lay a locked diary, its leather cover worn but pristine. Japp produced a small tool, and with a click, the lock yielded. Poirot opened it, revealing pages of neat, feminine handwriting. The entries began innocuously, notes on the Harrington children's lessons, observations about the horses, but grew increasingly cryptic. One passage, dated a week prior, caught Poirot's eye. "The shadows here are not mere fog. They watch me. A.H. knows my secret, and I fear the consequences." A.H. Archibald Harrington? Poirot's moustache twitched. "A secret known to the lord of the manor," he murmured. "What did she uncover, I wonder?" He turned to Japp. "This diary, it is a window into her soul. We must speak with Lord Harrington again." They descended to the library, a cavernous room lined with leather-bound tomes and portraits of stern-faced ancestors. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and cigar smoke, the fire in the grate casting flickering shadows. Lord bastard daughter threatening the Harrington legacy could drive a desperate man to murder. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And this secret, monsieur, who else knew?" Harrington shook his head. "Only Constance, my wife, suspected, no one else." Yet his hesitation suggested otherwise, and Poirot filed it away, a thread to tug later. The investigation shifted to Eliza Thorne, the housemaid, whose nervous demeanor in the drawing room had piqued Poirot's interest. He found her in the kitchen, kneading dough with fierce concentration, the air warm with the aroma of baking bread. Her blonde hair was pinned tightly, but her eyes, red-rimmed, betrayed sleeplessness or tears. "Madame Thorne," Poirot said, his tone gentle but probing, "you cleaned Mademoiselle Vance's room. You knew her habits, her possessions. Did you notice anything unusual? Letters, perhaps, or signs of distress?" Eliza's hands stilled, flour dusting her apron. "She was private, monsieur," she said, her voice tight. "But I found her burning papers once in the grate. She caught me watching, got angry, said I'd ruin everything if I spoke of it." Her eyes darted to the door, and Poirot pressed further. "And what did you see in those papers?" Eliza hesitated, then confessed. "A letter, half-burned, about the estate, something about a will. She said I'd be dismissed if I told anyone." A red herring, perhaps, but Poirot noted it. Eliza's fear of exposure suggested petty thefts, a motive to silence Vance before accusations surfaced. Leaving the kitchen, Poirot and Japp ventured to the stables, the heart of Candlewick's fortune. The air was thick with the musk of horses and hay, the stalls alive with the restless movements of thoroughbreds. Reginald Thorne, the stable hand, was mucking out a stall, his wiry frame tense as Poirot approached. "Monsieur Thorne," Poirot said, "the dagger. It came from the manor's collection. Where was it kept in the stables, if at all?" Reginald pointed to a tack room, where a wooden case held tools and odds, empty now, where the dagger had rested. "It went missing days ago," he said defensively. "Anyone could have taken it, servants, guests, even the family." He adjusted a plant, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the household's tension. "Doctor," Poirot said, "you spoke of Mademoiselle Vance's fears. Did you see these threatening notes?" Beaumont nodded, his fingers pausing. "She showed me one, unsigned, slipped under her door. It warned her to leave, or else. I urged her to tell the police, but she refused." His voice was steady, but Poirot caught a flicker of unease. "And you, monsieur, were close to her." Beaumont flushed. "As a physician, I cared for her well-being. Nothing more. Yet servant whispers of a romantic attachment suggested otherwise. A spurned lover, perhaps, with a motive?" As dusk settled, the fog thickened, wrapping Candlewick in a shroud of mystery. Poirot, standing in the manor's hall, overheard a hushed conversation between two maids. "Dr. Beaumont was seen leaving her room late one night," one whispered. "Carrying a vial, he was." Poirot followed the lead, catching Beaumont in the corridor, slipping a small glass vial into his pocket. "Monsieur," Poirot said sharply, "what is this you conceal?" Beaumont startled, his hand jerking. "A sedative for my own use," he stammered. "I've been sleepless since the murder." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Poison, perhaps. Or another red herring." The day's inquiries ended with a startling discovery. Returning to the library, Poirot noticed a portrait of a young Archibald Harrington, its frame slightly askew. Behind it, a hidden compartment revealed a packet of letters, correspondence between Vance and a solicitor, discussing her claim to the estate as Harrington's daughter. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured. The secret was not so secret. But who else knew? And had they killed to keep it buried? As night fell, a gunshot shattered the silence, the library window exploding in a spray of glass. Poirot and Japp rushed in, finding a bullet embedded in the wall, inches from where Harrington had stood moments before. "An attempt on my life," Harrington gasped, his face ashen. Poirot's eyes scanned the room, noting the angle of the shot, outside, from the woods. A warning? A distraction? Or Chapter 5. The Midnight Rendezvous. The night of October 1932 cloaked Candlewick Stables in a velvet darkness. the fog that had lingered since the murder of Miss Eleanor Vance now thinning under a canopy of stars. The estate, with its sprawling manor and famed stables, seemed to hold its breath, the silence broken only by the occasional snort of a horse or the rustle of leaves in the autumn breeze. The paddock, where the governess had met her end with a Harrington dagger in her heart, lay bathed in moonlight, its chalk outline a ghostly reminder of the crime. Hercule Poirot, his mind a whirl of clues and contradictions, orchestrated a daring reenactment of that fateful evening, determined to coax the truth from the shadows. His Homburg hat cast a sharp silhouette as he gathered the household at the paddock, lanterns casting eerie, flickering glows that danced across the grass. Inspector Japp, his pipe tucked away, stood at Poirot's side, his skepticism tempered by curiosity. "This is a bold move, Poirot," he muttered, his breath visible in the chill air. "Reenacting the crime with the whole lot here? You're stirring a hornet's nest." Poirot's green eyes glinted, his mustache twitching. "Mon ami, the truth, it hides in the reactions of the guilty. By recreating the moment, we shall see who flinches." The suspects, Lord Archibald Harrington, Lady Constance Harrington, Reginald Thorne, Eliza Thorne, and Dr. Silas Beaumont, stood in a tense semicircle, their faces illuminated by the lantern's glow, each betraying a mix of apprehension and defiance. Poirot paced the paddock, his patent leather shoes sinking slightly into the damp earth. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and commanding. "On the night of the murder, Mademoiselle Vance walked here, her steps light, her mind perhaps troubled. The stable clock struck 7, and a scream shattered the silence. Let us retrace her path and see what the night reveals." He gestured to the chalk outline, where Vance had fallen, the dagger's absence now a stark void in the narrative. Into knots. Poirot led the group to the wood's edge, where the muddy footprints had vanished into the underbrush. The lanterns cast long shadows, the trees looming like silent judges. Kneeling, Poirot examined the ground, his gloved fingers brushing aside leaves. A glint of metal caught his eye, a locket half buried in the mud, its silver surface engraved with EV to SB. Eleanor Vance to Silas Beaumont? He held it up, the lantern light catching its curve. "Dr. Beaumont," Poirot said, turning to the physician, whose spectacles glinted nervously. "This belongs to Mademoiselle Vance, oui? And the initials, they suggest a connection intimate." Beaumont, standing stiffly, adjusted his glasses. "We were engaged, secretly," he confessed, his voice low. "She feared the Harringtons' disapproval, given her status. I gave her that locket as a promise." His admission drew gasps from the group, particularly from Lady Constance, whose eyes narrowed. Poirot's gray cells churned. A secret engagement provided motive for others, jealousy, scandal, or fear of exposure. But was Beaumont's love genuine, or a facade for darker intentions? Returning to the paddock, Poirot shifted focus to Reginald Thorne, the stable hand who had found the body. Reginald, his wiry frame tense, stood near the fence, his hands clenched. "Monsieur Thorne," Poirot said, "you were in the hayloft, you claim, when this scream sounded. Yet your boots, they match the size of the prints leading to the woods." Reginald's face reddened. "I ran to her, monsieur, after the scream. I didn't kill her." His wife, Eliza, stepped forward, her apron fluttering. "He's telling the truth. I was with him later, in the stables." Her defense was fierce, but her eyes betrayed uncertainty, and Poirot noted it. A red herring emerged when Japp, searching Reginald's quarters earlier, had found a bloody glove tucked under a mattress. "Care to explain this, Thorne?" Japp demanded, holding it up. Reginald's eyes widened. "That ain't mine. Someone planted it, I swear." Poirot examined the glove, noting its size, too small for Reginald's hands, but perfect for Eliza's. Madame Thorne, he said, turning much when wealth is at stake. Lady Constance, her composure fraying, interjected. Eleanor was a threat, yes, but I loved her as my own, despite everything. Her words rang hollow, and Poirot noted the strain in her voice. Jealousy of a rival for her husband's affection, or fear of losing her status. The locket, the glove, the footprints, all pointed to a web of motives, but the true killer remained elusive. As the reenactment concluded, the group returned to the manor, the lanterns dimming in the rising wind. Poirot lingered in the paddock, his mind replaying the scene. The scream's timing, the dagger's accessibility, the blurred footprints, all suggested a calculated act, not a crime of passion. He was about to join Japp when a gunshot shattered the night, its crack echoing from the manor. The group rushed inside, finding the library window shattered, a bullet embedded in the oak-panelled wall, inches from where Lord Harrington had stood moments before. "An attempt on my life!" Harrington gasped, his face ashen, his hand clutching his chest as if to steady his heart. Poirot examined the scene, noting the bullet's trajectory, from the woods through the window. "A warning, perhaps," he murmured, "or a diversion to mislead us." Japp's men searched the grounds but found no trace of the shooter, the fog swallowing any clues. The household, already on edge, erupted in whispers, fear, suspicion, or guilt. Poirot's eyes scanned the faces. Lady Constance's pallor, Beaumont's clenched jaw, Reginald's fidgeting, Eliza's tears. Someone knew more than they admitted. The reenactment had stirred the pot, revealing new threads, the locket tying Vance to Beaumont, the glove implicating the Thornes, the gunshot targeting Harrington. Yet Poirot sensed a deeper truth, hidden in the interplay of motives. The killer, he told Japp, they play a game of shadows, directing our gaze elsewhere. But the little grey cells, they see through the fog. As the group dispersed, their footsteps heavy on the manor's parquet, a chilling question lingered. Was the dagger the true weapon, or merely a prop in a larger deception? And who had fired the shot? Eleanor Vance, the governess, stabbed in the paddock with a Harrington dagger, had cast a pall over the household, and the recent shot, whether a warning or a failed assassination, had tightened the web of suspicion. Hercule Poirot, his Homburg hat tilted precisely, stood in the manor's grand hall, his green eyes sharp with the relentless churn of his little grey cells. The reenactment had stirred reactions, revealed secrets, but the killer remained a shadow, their motives tangled in a labyrinth of deceit. Poirot's investigation intensified, his methodical approach cutting through the household's veneer of civility. He began the morning in the kitchen, where the clatter of pots and the warm aroma of baking scones filled the air, a stark contrast to the tension that gripped Eliza Thorne, the housemaid. Her blonde hair was pinned tightly, her apron dusted with flour, but her red-rimmed eyes betrayed sleeplessness or fear. Poirot, his voice gentle yet probing, leaned against a scrubbed oak table. "Madame Thorne," he said, "your husband. He argues with Mademoiselle Vance, accuses her of meddling. You defend him fiercely. Pourquoi? What binds you so tightly to his innocence?" Eliza's hands stilled, her knuckles whitening as she gripped a rolling pin. "Reggie's a good man, monsieur," she said, her voice trembling. "Miss Vance, she was always at the stables, poking into things. Horse care, supplies, even the accounts. She caught me reading her letters once in her room, correspondence with a solicitor about the estate." Her eyes darted to the door, as if expecting interruption. "She threatened to expose me, said I'd lose my place. But I didn't kill her." Her words spilled out, a mix of defiance and desperation, and Poirot noted the crack in her composure. Theft, perhaps, or something deeper, a motive to silence Vance before she could ruin them. "What did these letters say, madame?" Poirot pressed, his gaze unwavering. Eliza swallowed hard. Something about a will, a claim to Candlewick. She was planning to contest it, said she had rights. Poirot's mustache twitched. Vance, as Lord Harrington's illegitimate daughter, had indeed sought a share of the— Monsieur, from my own nerves, this tragedy has unsettled us all. His voice was steady, but Poirot caught the flicker of unease. A red herring emerged when Japp, searching the manor's apothecary, discovered a poisoned apple among Vance's belongings, laced with traces of arsenic. "Care to explain this, Doctor?" Japp demanded, holding the fruit in a gloved hand. Beaumont paled. "I prescribed it for her insomnia, nothing more." Poirot, however, deduced the truth. Chemical analysis, conducted hastily by a constable, showed the poison applied post-mortem, a clumsy attempt to mislead. "The apple. It is a distraction," Poirot murmured, "planted to cast suspicion on the good doctor. But by whom?" Poirot's attention turned to the woods where the footprints from the crime scene had vanished. Accompanied by Japp, he retraced the path, the underbrush crunching underfoot. The lanterns from the reenactment had revealed little, but now, in daylight, Poirot noticed a faint trail, broken twigs, scuffed earth, leading to a clearing. There, a scrap of fabric caught on a thorn matched Lady Constance's dainty boots. Confronting her in the drawing-room, its gas lamps casting shadows on the fox-hunting portraits, Poirot held up the fabric. "Madame, you walked these woods the night of the murder, oui? Your alibi, it is lacking." Lady Constance, seated on a velvet chaise, her raven curls framed by a lace collar, clutched her pearl necklace. "I took a walk earlier that day," she said, her voice strained. "The woods are peaceful. I saw nothing of the crime." Yet her alibi crumbled under scrutiny. No servants could confirm her whereabouts at 7 o'clock. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "The footprints, they are fresh, madame. You were there, close to the paddock, when Mademoiselle Vance fell." Her lips parted, but no defense came, only a flicker of fear in her eyes. Poirot's methodology shone through, his observations meticulous, his questions probing micro-expressions. "The eyes, they betray the soul."
Cobwebs, seeking further clues. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood and mildew, the floorboards creaking underfoot. Among forgotten relics, a child's rocking horse, a cracked mirror, he found a hidden compartment behind a loose panel. Inside lay a will, drafted by Vance's solicitor, naming her as a beneficiary of Candlewick's fortune. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, pocketing the document. "The stakes, they are higher than we knew." As he turned to leave, footsteps creaked outside the attic door. Before he could react, the door slammed shut, the lock clicking with finality. Darkness enveloped him, the storm's rumble growing louder. Poirot's heart quickened, but his mind remained sharp. "Someone watches," he whispered, his fingers tracing the door's seams. Was it the killer, fearing exposure, or an ally seeking to protect the truth? He tested the hinges, finding them loose, and with effort pried open a hidden passage leading to the stables, a secret route known only to the household. Emerging into the stables, the air heavy with horseflesh and hay, Poirot paused, his breath steadying. The passage suggested an insider's knowledge, narrowing the suspects further. The storm outside raged, lightning illuminating the stalls, where a horse pawed restlessly. Poirot's gray cells churned. The will, the footprints, the poisoned apple, all threads in a tapestry of deception, but the killer's hand remained elusive. The period-appropriate dialogue echoed in his mind. Japp's exasperated, "Dash it all, Poirot, you're barking up the wrong tree." And Lady Constance's strained, "I walked there earlier, nothing more." Each word, each glance was a clue,
and Poirot's methodical process, order, observation, elimination, drew him closer to the truth. The attic trap, the gunshot, the locket, all pointed to a calculated mind, orchestrating distractions to obscure the crime. As he returned to the manor, rain lashing the windows, Poirot's thoughts turned to the suspect's motives: Harrington's greed, Constance's jealousy, Reginald's grudge, Eliza's fear, Beaumont's love. The will confirmed Vance's threat to his meticulous mind, and waxed mustache was determined to unravel. The attic trap, where he had been locked moments after discovering Vance's will, had only sharpened his resolve. The little gray cells whirring as he emerged into the stables through a concealed passage, dust-laden but undeterred. The passage, its narrow stone walls slick with damp, led from the attic to the stable's tack room, a secret known only to those intimate with the manor's bones. Poirot stood amid the musk of horseflesh and leather, the restless snorts of thoroughbreds echoing in the dimly lit stalls. Lightning flashed, illuminating the rafters, and he murmured, "The killer. They are close, mon ami." This passage, it is a thread that binds the crime to the household. Inspector Japp, summoned by a stable boy, joined him, his coat soaked from the rain. "Blimey, Poirot, locked in an attic. This case gets queerer by the hour," he grumbled, his pipe unlit in the damp air. Poirot's investigation pressed forward, the storm's fury mirroring the tension within Candlewick. He began in the conservatory, where exotic orchids and ferns thrived under glass, their vibrant greens a stark contrast to the grim task at hand. Eliza Thorne, the housemaid, was there, tending to a wilting plant, her blonde hair disheveled, her apron stained with earth. Her eyes, red-rimmed, widened at Poirot's approach. "Madame Thorne," he said, his voice gentle but incisive, "you saw something the night of the murder, did you not? You were near the paddock, despite your claim of polishing silver in the east wing." Eliza's hands trembled, a leaf falling from her grasp. I was there, monsieur," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I saw Miss Vance arguing with Dr. Beaumont in the paddock, just before the scream. He had the dagger in his hand, waving it, angry-like. I ran, scared I'd be seen." Her words spilled out, a torrent of fear, and Poirot's mustache twitched. "You fled, madam, and told no one. Why?" Eliza's eyes darted to the door. "I thought they'd blame Reggie, my husband. He'd argued with her too, and folks already suspect him." Her testimony cast a shadow on Beaumont,
backed by Reginald Thorne, who had been in the hayloft. Poirot noted the coincidence, a thread too neat to be trusted. A false clue surfaced when Japp, searching the stables, found a love letter tucked in a saddlebag, addressed from Reginald to Vance, hinting at an affair.
"This yours, Thorne?"
Japp demanded, confronting the stable hand in the tack room. Reginald's face reddened.
"That's not my writing,"
he protested. Poirot, examining the letter, noted inconsistencies. The ink too fresh, the script too polished for a labourer's hand.
"A forgery, mon ami,"
he told Japp.
"Someone seeks to muddy the waters, to point fingers at Monsieur Thorne."
But who? Eliza, protecting her husband, or another with a deeper motive? Evidence mounted as Poirot revisited the dagger, now in police custody. Japp revealed a breakthrough. A single, clear fingerprint, partially smudged, matched Lady Constance's delicate hand. Confronting her in the drawing room, its gas lamps casting shadows on the fox-hunting portraits, Poirot held up a photograph of the print.
"Madame, your touch is on the murder weapon. How do you explain this?"
Lady Constance, seated on a velvet chaise, her raven curls pinned tightly, clutched her pearl necklace. I handled the dagger days before. In the hall," she stammered. "It was out of place, and I returned it to the case." Her explanation was plausible, but her eyes betrayed panic, and Poirot sensed a lie half told. The storm's intensity grew, lightning illuminating the manor's corridors, thunder punctuating the mounting tension. Poirot's methodology, order, observation, deduction, shone through as he pieced together the clues. The bruises on Vance's wrists, analyzed by a coroner's report, confirmed a left-handed assailant, narrowing the suspects to Reginald, Eliza, and, surprisingly, Lady Constance, whose ambidexterity was noted by a maid who'd seen her write with both hands. "The killer, they are cunning," Poirot told Japp. "But the body? It does not lie. The angle of the wound, the force." Eliza's face crumpled, tears spilling. "I saw the murder, monsieur, but I fled. I was afraid, for Reggie, for myself. I didn't do it." Her voice broke, but she stopped short of naming the killer, her eyes wide with terror. Poirot pressed, "Who did you see, madame?" Before she could answer, lightning flashed, and a figure darted past the conservatory's glass walls, vanishing into the storm. The period-appropriate dialogue echoed in the manor's halls. Japp's exasperated, "Dash it all, Poirot! We're chasing shadows!" And Harrington's gruff, "You're barking up the wrong tree, man." But Poirot remained unmoved, his logic unyielding. The storm's chaos mirrored the household's turmoil, each suspect a thread in a tapestry of deceit. The will, the fingerprint, the forged letter, all pointed to a calculated crime. But the killer's identity remained elusive. Poirot stood at the conservatory's edge, rain drumming on the glass, his mind weaving the clues together. The passage from the attic, the left-handed wound, Eliza's testimony, all suggested an insider, someone intimate with Candlewick's secrets. The figure in the storm, fleeting as a ghost, was a warning or a mistake, and Poirot knew the next move would be critical. "The truth," he murmured. "It is close. But the killer, they are closer still." As thunder roared, he vowed to unravel the final threads, even as the storm threatened to drown them all. Chapter 8. Unraveling the Knot. The storm that raged over Candlewick Stables on the night of October 1932 was a tempest of both nature and human deceit, its thunderclaps echoing the mounting tension within the manor's ancient walls. Rain lashed the ivy-clad stone, the wind howling like a chorus of banshees, as if urging Hercule Poirot to untangle the web of lies surrounding the murder of Miss Eleanor Vance, the governess stabbed in the paddock with a Harrington dagger. The clues, footprints, a locket, a forged letter, a hidden will, had tightened the noose around the suspects, yet the killer remained a shadow, their motives obscured by—
But what did you truly witness? The truth. It is time to speak it. Eliza's hands trembled, her voice barely audible.
"It was him, monsieur. I saw Dr. Beaumont in the paddock, waving the dagger, shouting at her about their engagement. She was crying, saying she'd tell everyone. Then the scream came, and I ran." Her words painted a damning picture, but Poirot noted the hesitation in her eyes, a flicker of doubt or deception. "You are certain, madame? The fog it obscures, and fear it distorts." Eliza nodded, but her gaze darted to the door as if expecting rescue or accusation. Seeking Beaumont, Poirot found him in the stables, tending to a lame horse, the air thick with the musk of hay and leather. The physician's spectacles glinted in the lantern light, his hands steady as he bandaged the animal's leg. "Doctor," Poirot said, stepping into the stall, "Madame Thorne accuses you of wielding the dagger, of a quarrel turned deadly. What say you?" Beaumont's face tightened, his voice low. "We argued, yes, about our secret engagement. Eleanor wanted to reveal it, to claim her place here, but I urged discretion. I left her alive, monsieur, and went to this very stable to treat this horse. Reginald Thorne saw me here when the scream sounded. His alibi, corroborated by the stable hand, was convenient, and Poirot's mustache twitched. A conspiracy, perhaps, between the two men. A red herring surfaced when Japp, rummaging through the manor's ledgers at Poirot's request, uncovered evidence of Lord Harrington's gambling debts, rumored to be ruinous. "Look here, Poirot," Japp said, waving a ledger in the library, its leather-bound pages yellowed with age. "Vance was sniffing around these accounts, threatening to expose Harrington's losses." Poirot examined the figures, his brow furrowing. The debts were substantial but old, settled months ago, the estate's wealth intact thanks to recent racing wins. "A distraction, mon ami," Poirot murmured. "The killer wishes us to see ruin where there is none." Returning to the locket found in the woods, Poirot saw witnesses to mask the act. The bruises on Mademoiselle Vance's wrists, they speak of a left-handed assailant. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. Reginald and Eliza Thorne were left-handed, as was Lady Constance, her ambidexterity a subtle clue gleaned from a maid's observation. But the killer? They are clever, planting clues to mislead: the glove, the apple, the letter. Confronting the Thornes in their cramped quarters, Poirot pressed harder. Reginald, his wiry frame tense, stood by a narrow window, rain streaking the glass. "Monsieur Thorne," Poirot said, "the forged letter, it points to you, yet it is not your hand. Who seeks to frame you?" Reginald's face crumpled, his voice breaking. "It was Eliza. She did it, monsieur, to protect me. Vance was blackmailing us over a theft, some silver I took years ago. She promised us a share of her inheritance to keep quiet, then threatened to expose us." His accusation was a thunderbolt, and Eliza gasped, her eyes wide. "Lies!" she cried. "Reggie wanted her money, thought she'd share it with us servants. He's the one who argued with her." The accusation hung heavy, the storm's roar amplifying the drama. Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mind sifting truth from falsehood. The forged letter, the fingerprint, the locket, all pointed to a calculated effort to divert suspicion. Lady Constance, seated nearby, clutched her pearls, her face pale. "You accuse each other," Poirot said, "but the truth, it lies in the details. The scream, it was too timed, the footprints too convenient." He turned to Lord Harrington, whose robust frame seemed to shrink under scrutiny. "Monsieur, your daughter's claim threatened your empire. Did you act to preserve it?" Harrington's jaw tightened. "I loved her, in my way," he growled, "but she was a threat, yes. I didn't kill her, Poirot." His denial was firm, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of guilt, and Poirot noted it. The narrative, rich with period-appropriate dialogue, dash it all, Poirot, through the maze of motives. Harrington's greed, Constance's jealousy, Reginald's grudge, Eliza's fear, Beaumont's love. The locket's photograph, the will's revelation, the left-handed wound, all pointed to a killer intimate with Candlewick's secrets, someone who knew the passage, the dagger, the estate's stakes. Standing at the manor's threshold, Poirot gazed at the stables, their silhouettes stark against the storm's flashes. The note's summons was a gamble, but Poirot was no stranger to such risks. "The truth," he murmured, "it waits in the shadows, but so does danger." As thunder roared, he resolved to meet the challenge, knowing the killer's next move could reveal them or silence him forever. Chapter 9. The Final Confrontation. Midnight,
descended upon Candlewick Stables with a stillness that belied the storm's earlier fury, the clouds parting to reveal a crescent moon casting a silver glow over the Sussex estate. The manor, its ivy-clad walls steeped in secrets, stood silent, the stable's silhouette looming like a sentinel in the darkness. The murder of Miss Eleanor Vance, the governess stabbed with a Harrington dagger, had woven a web of deception, footprints, a locket, a forged letter, a hidden will, that Hercule Poirot, with his meticulous mind and waxed mustache, was determined to unravel. The mysterious note slipped under his door, "Meet in the stables at midnight, or the truth dies," had set the stage for a confrontation, and Poirot, ever the master of order and method, prepared to face the shadow that had eluded him. His green eyes gleamed with anticipation, his little gray cells poised for revelation. Inspector Japp, his face etched with concern, insisted on accompanying him, his revolver tucked discreetly under his coat. "This is madness, Poirot," he whispered, as they approached the stables, their boots crunching on the gravel path. "It's a trap, mark my words." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Mon ami, the trap, it is also a window. The killer, that blended with the night." Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and resolve. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice trembling, "I had to speak with you alone. I know too much, and I fear for my life." Poirot's eyes narrowed, studying her. "Madame, you confess to knowledge of the crime? Speak, and let the truth breathe." She took a shaky breath, clutching her cloak. "I argued with Eleanor that night in the paddock. She demanded recognition as Archibald's daughter, a share of the estate. I was furious. She threatened our family, our legacy. But I didn't kill her, monsieur. I swear it." Her words were fervent, but Poirot noted the tremor in her hands, the way her eyes darted to the door. A partial truth, perhaps, or a desperate plea to deflect suspicion. Before he could respond, another figure stepped from the darkness, Dr. Silas Beaumont, his spectacles glinting, a pistol gleaming in his hand. "Enough, Constance," he said, his voice cold. "You've said too much already." He turned to Poirot, his face twisted with rage. "You've meddled too far, monsieur. Eleanor was mine, but she chose the estate over me. I killed her in a moment of passion, and I'll not let you ruin me." The pistol leveled at Poirot, its barrel steady, and Japp tensed in the shadows, ready to intervene. But Poirot raised a hand, his voice calm, commanding. "No, doctor, you did not kill Mademoiselle Vance. The little grey cells, they see clearly. The crime, it was not passion, but calculation." He stepped closer, undeterred by the weapon. "The bruises on her wrists, the angle of the wound, they speak of a left-handed assailant, yet you are right-handed. The scream, it was timed to draw witnesses, a theatrical flourish. And the footprints, they were planted to mislead. No, monsieur, you play a part, but not the killer's." Beaumont's hand wavered, his eyes flickering with doubt, but Poirot turned to the shadows, where another presence stirred. "Lord Harrington," he called, "you can conceal yourself no longer. It is you must—" "An alibi, knowing the fog would hide your escape." Harrington's shoulders slumped, his defiance crumbling. "She was my daughter, yes, but a bastard. A threat to everything I've built. The stables, the horses, they're my life. She'd have ruined us, taken it all for herself." His confession was raw, unadorned, and Poirot nodded, his face impassive. "The greed, monsieur. It blinds. You staged the scene, the glove, the poisoned apple, the gunshot, to point to others. But the truth, it cannot be hidden from Poirot." Japp sprang from the shadows,
his revolver trained on Harrington. "You're under arrest, my lord," he said, cuffing the man's wrists as he struggled briefly. Lady Constance gasped, her hands covering her face, while Beaumont lowered his pistol, his face ashen. I thought to protect her memory," Beaumont stammered. "To take the blame." Poirot shook his head. "Your love, it was genuine, Doctor, but misguided. Madame Harrington, you knew, did you not? You covered for him. Out of loyalty or fear." Lady Constance's tears fell freely. "I suspected, but I couldn't believe it. I burned her letters, hid the truth for the family." Her complicity was a secondary sin, but Poirot's focus remained on Harrington, the architect of the crime. The red herrings, Beaumont's pistol, the forged letter, the poisoned apple, were resolved as Harrington's diversions, planted to obscure his guilt. The glove, too small for Reginald, had been placed to implicate the Thorns, while the gunshot was a staged attempt to paint Harrington as a victim. The evidence, meticulously gathered, painted a clear picture. A safe in Harrington's study, discovered by Japp, held incriminating letters between Vance and her solicitor, confirming her claim. The bruises, analysed by the coroner, matched Harrington's grip strength, a detail only a rider's hands could produce. The stables, alive with the restless snorts of horses, seemed to exhale as the truth emerged, the moonlight casting long shadows across the stalls. Poirot's deductive process, order, method.
"The human soul," he murmured to Japp. "It hides its darkness, but the little grey cells, they find the light." The confrontation had ended, but one final gathering remained, to lay bare the full scope of the crime, and ensure justice for the Governess, who had dared to challenge an empire. Chapter 10. The Resolution at Dawn. Dawn broke over Candlewick Stables on October 5, 1932, its first rays piercing the thinning fog that had cloaked the Sussex estate in mystery for days. The manor, its ivy-clad walls bathed in soft gold, stood serene, as if cleansed by the storm's departure. The stables, heart of the Harrington legacy, hummed with the quiet stirrings of horses, their snorts a gentle counterpoint to the turmoil that had culminated in the midnight confrontation. The murder of Miss Eleanor Vance, the Governess stabbed with a Harrington dagger, had been solved, her killer unmasked by Hercule Poirot's relentless logic. Now, as the household gathered in the drawing room, the diminutive Belgian detective, his Homburg hat resting on a side table, prepared to lay bare the final threads of the tapestry, his green eyes gleaming with the clarity of truth. The room, with its gas lamps dimmed and fox-hunting portraits gazing sternly, was heavy with anticipation. Lord Archibald Harrington, his robust frame now slumped in handcuffs, sat under Inspector Japp's watchful eye, his blue eyes dulled by defeat. Lady Constance Harrington, her raven curls pinned tightly, clutched a lace handkerchief, her pale face etched with grief and shame. Reginald Thorne, the stable hand, and his wife Eliza stood near the fireplace, their faces a mix of relief and wariness. Dr. Silas Beaumont, his spectacles glinting, adjusted his cuffs, his composure strained but intact. The air carried the scent of polished oak and beeswax, a stark contrast to the raw emotions swirling within. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice precise and resonant, pacing slowly before the group. "The crime that has darkened Candlewick Stables is no longer a mystery. Mademoiselle Eleanor Vance, a governess of intellect and courage."
Harrington's voice was a low growl, his defiance spent. "She'd have ruined us, Poirot. The stables, my life's work, gone to a bastard child who knew nothing of our world." His confession, raw and unadorned, drew a gasp from Lady Constance, her handkerchief pressed to her lips. Poirot's gaze remained steady.
You staged the scene, monsieur, with cunning. The scream, it was your cry, not hers, to draw witnesses and establish an alibi. The footprints leading to the woods, you planted them, knowing the fog would blur their truth. The glove in Monsieur Thorne's quarters, the poisoned apple in Mademoiselle Vance's room, these were your diversions, meant to point to others. Poirot turned to the group, his voice rising. But the evidence, it does not lie. The bruises on Mademoiselle Vance's wrists, they match your grip, monsieur, a strength honed by years of riding. Your ambidexterity, a skill few noted, allowed you to strike left-handed, masking your hand. And the safe in your study, discovered by Inspector Japp, held letters between Mademoiselle Vance and her solicitor, detailing her claim. These you could not destroy, and they betrayed you. Japp, standing by the door, nodded grimly. We found the safe behind a portrait, Poirot. Letters, dates, all confirming she was pressing her case. And cat fur, gray, like the stable cats, on Harrington's coat, placing him at the scene. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Oui, mon ami, the cat. It is an unexpected witness. Its fur, caught on your coat as you fled through the paddock, is a detail you could not foresee. The red herrings, meticulously planted, were unraveled. The bloody glove, too small for Reginald, was a clumsy attempt to frame the Thornes, who admitted to petty thefts, but not murder. We took some silver years back, Reginald confessed, his voice low. Miss Vance knew, promised us a share if we kept quiet, then threatened to tell. But we didn't kill her. Eliza, tears streaming, nodded. I saw the murder, monsieur, but I ran, afraid for Reggie. Their fear, Poirot deduced, was genuine. Their crimes minor and misguided. Spared her from arrest, but not from shame. The gunshot through the library window, Poirot revealed, was Harrington's final gambit, staged to paint himself as a victim. You fired from the woods, monsieur, knowing the angle would suggest an outsider. But the trajectory, it was too precise, too convenient. Harrington's silence was his final admission, his empire crumbling under the weight of justice. The narrative, rich with period-appropriate dialogue. Curse you, Poirot, Harrington had snarled in the stables, and Japp's gruff, we've got him, old chap, wove a tapestry of resolution. The atmospheric tension, so palpable in the storm's chaos, gave way to clarity. The manor's corridors no longer echoing with secrets. Poirot's methodology, order, observation, deduction, had triumphed. His scrutiny of micro-expressions and inconsistencies unmasking the killer. The will, found in the attic, held Vance's final wish. Her share of the estate, should she claim it, was to go to charities supporting orphaned children. A poignant echo of her own past. She sought family, Poirot said, but also justice for those like her. The estate, now under legal scrutiny, would honor her intent, its wealth redistributed to causes she championed. The stables, their horses pawing softly, seemed to mourn her, their legacy tainted but enduring. As Japp led Harrington to the waiting police car, the household dispersed, their faces a mix of relief and sorrow. Reginald and Eliza, their thefts forgiven in light of their cooperation, returned to their duties, their bond strengthened by survival. Beaumont, his heart heavy, vowed to leave Candlewick, his love for Vance a memory untainted by guilt. Lady Constance, her status diminished, faced a future of quiet shame, her loyalty to her husband a bitter lesson. Poirot stood at the manor's threshold, gazing at the stables, their silhouettes softened by dawn's light. The fog had lifted, the valley serene, as if cleansed by the truth. The human heart, he murmured to Japp, it hides mysteries deeper than any fog. But the little gray cells, they find the light. He adjusted his coat, his mind already turning